Welcome back to our study on the book of Romans. This is the Sonship Review Part 7, and this is session 23. We left off last time talking about God answering Job out of the whirlwind, and he's talking about Job's friends when he says, "Who is this that is darkening counsel by words without knowledge?" And what God is about to do now is he's going to give Job his own counsel. But when he does it, he doesn't give him counsel in the way we would normally think. Normally, you would think someone would just say, "Hey, here's what you need to do, and here's how you need to do it." But what God is going to do is take Job through a series of questions, and they're designed to get Job's thinking off of himself and on to something about God and what God is doing. So let me show you this. This is Job 38, verse 4. "Where wast thou when I laid the foundations of the earth? Declare if thou hast understanding." Verse 5. "Who hath laid the measures thereof, if thou knowest? Or who hath stretched the line upon it?" Verse 6. "Whereupon are the foundations thereof fastened? Or who laid the cornerstone thereof?" And now verse 8. "Or who shut up the sea with doors when it brake forth, as if it had issued out of the womb?" Now look, we didn't read every verse, but we read about half of them there in that first part. Look, what is this about? I mean, just look at those verses. I know you don't have them in your notes like you normally would, but look. "Where wast thou when I laid the foundations of the earth? Who laid the measures thereof of the earth? And who stretched the line upon it? Whereupon are the foundations fastened? Who laid the cornerstone thereof? And who shut up the sea with doors when it brake forth as it issued from the womb?" What is he talking about here? I'm trying to get you to think the way he's trying to get Job to think. Did you say something?
Yeah, he's talking about himself.
He's talking about things that he did, yeah, and now add to that. And
that no one was there when he did it.
all right, Job certainly wasn't there to see it. Now, Job may know the answers to some of these questions. For instance, who shut up the sea, or who laid the cornerstone? I'm sure Job would probably say, "Well, you did, Lord." But he laid the cornerstone of what? What is this whole thing about? We take you back to that first verse. "Where wast thou when I laid the foundations of the earth?" Everything that follows is about that. So it is, Mark's right, it is about what God is doing. It is about God. But what is God talking about himself? There is something he was doing. What is this a reference to? Yeah, it's the creation. What God is trying to get Job to do is to begin thinking about why God created this whole thing to begin with. There's a purpose behind this. Look, when God says, look, just one more time, when I laid the foundations of the earth, when I laid the measures of it and stretched the line upon it, when I fastened the foundations and laid the cornerstone of it, Job's got to be looking at that and going, well, look, I know God did that. I know he did that. But what God is saying is, see, doesn't this sound a little bit, if you don't connect it, it sounds crazy. Job is suffering. And if it wasn't God he was talking to, he might be tempted to say, "Hey, look, God created the earth. All well and good. I'm hurting here. I'm covered with boils from head to toe. I've lost my kids. All my lands are gone. My enemies have taken it over. I am penniless. And my wife, she's not very supportive. Can I get some help?" And God says, "Okay, I'll give you some counsel. Think about why I created all of this to begin with. What am I doing when I do this?" That's the kind of questions. Now, in other words, could we say this, that God originally had a program for the earth? Well, he did. And he needs Job to quit thinking small. He needs Job to start thinking, Look, I'm going to show you something in a moment that will tie all of this together. But for now, I'm just trying to lead you down this path so you'll think of it on your own. He said, Job, quit thinking about your little isolated situation. When I say it that way, I don't mean to diminish that what Job was going through wasn't any kind of big deal. But in the scheme of what's going on, it is. It's that same way Paul was thinking when he was going through all the things he went through. And he said, this light affliction, which is but for a moment. How could he say that? Because like God was trying to get Job to do, he wanted Job to see something much bigger that his suffering was an important part of. Not just the suffering. And when Paul saw that, he's able to look at all the things that are happening to him and go, this is a light affliction, which is but for a moment. Because he's not making light of the fact that he's been beaten and all the other things that have happened to him. He's talking about in comparison to this grand purpose that God has, that even his sufferings are an important part of. And until we wake up and start seeing that the little things that are going on in our life are not the issue, but they are an important part of a much bigger program, we're never going to get past just, oh, poor me. And we got to get beyond that. And the only way to do that, and God knows this, he's looking at Job and he's saying, look, well, he's not saying it. He's not saying, Job, look, I know what you're going through is terrible. He doesn't even bring that up. He's trying to get Job now to see what's happening to him is a part of something that God is doing that was part of what he wanted to do with this earth from the very beginning. You say, well, so that's what he's doing with us? Well, the difference is we're part of a program not of what God is doing with this earth, but what he wants to do with the heavenly places. And until we can make the connection between the things that are going wrong for me and how that works in God's overall plan for the heavenly places, until we make that connection, we'll always be kind of focused on what's happening to us. You see that, at least that far. Okay, and again, I'll give you something in a moment that'll be a 1, 2, 3 that'll kind of tie all that together. God is trying to get Job to look at the earth and that what God is allowing to happen to Job is part of fulfilling his program with the earth. Now, it's only that way because the adversary did what he did. But that did happen. So now God has to do something about that. Okay. Job's friends, they knew some things. People today are the same way. They know some things about the Bible. But what they don't realize is God's overall plan and purpose. And when you don't know the overall plan and purpose, it's hard to see how all the parts fit together and what use they are or what that's about. You know what it's almost, I just think how many years I went to church, and if you'd have said to me, phooey, the years I went to church, how about the years I pastored churches? If you'd have said to me, what is God's overall plan and purpose? I would have looked at that and I would have thought, Now I don't know what I would have come up with, but I wouldn't have gotten it right because I didn't know enough to get it right. But when you're doing something without knowing what you're trying to achieve, it's like watching two people play chess and you don't know what the object of the game is. The object of a chess game is what? capture your opponent's king. If you don't know that's the object, when you make a certain move, there's a move in chess called a gambit. It's where you give away a piece that's a valuable and important piece for the purpose of setting yourself up to capture the other person's king. It's kind of a trap. It's kind of a misdirection. You get them thinking about capturing your queen, and you're hoping they're losing sight of what's going on another part of the board. But if you don't know what the object is, you might be fascinated watching all the different pieces move around the board in all the different ways. But if you don't know what it's after, you won't understand why the things that are being done are being done. That's where most believers are today. The things that are happening. That's why they want to line up in churches and healing lines. Because they don't understand the overall purpose. If they did, they would understand that their response to those things is an important part of fulfilling God's overall purpose with them, and that's going to have an impact in the heavenly places. And that's also why the Apostle Peter, over in 1 Peter, that's why he talks to them about their identity. Remember, he's talking to the remnant. But he's talking to them about their identity in Christ in connection with the overall program that is for the earth. And he talks to them about that in that way. Why? He wants them to see more than just the things the remnant is going to be suffering. He wants them to see how that has a place in the overall program there. He wants them to see that, I'm going to say it this way, and it's unfair because I didn't put the thing in the PowerPoint. They're the fulfillers of Hosea 1:8. And he's using terminology over there to tell them that. So that they will, so when they read back over here in the prophets, they're going to read, and then when they read what Peter writes over there, they're going to go, oh, well, that's us. That's what we're supposed to be doing. That's why he uses the kind of terminology that he does. You're a chosen generation and a royal priesthood. And he uses all of that. Look, we could talk about more of that, but I don't need to do that because I'm going to run out of time again. So to keep this in a nutshell form, let me just do this really simply. In Job 38 to 41, God is going to give counsel to Job, and it's going to come in 4 sets of questions. These questions are designed to get Job looking at God's overall plan and purpose. And here they are. And I hope I got them on the PowerPoint. Yes, thank you. Number 1, the first major section is Job 38, verses 4 to 23. We were reading questions out of that just a moment ago. And we identified what those were about. This is about the creation. This is God saying, hey, I did all this. Did you think I did this for no reason? There's something I wanted to do with this thing. Here's the second section. Job 38, verses 24 to 41. That is a different series of questions. And now, what he's going to do is take him through another series of questions that are presenting another doctrinal aspect to Job. Here's the third one. Job 39, verses 1 through 30. And in there's that third doctrinal category that God is going to take Job through. And then finally, in the last section, this one, in Job 40, 41 to 41, 34, God is going to talk about He's going to talk about what Job is going through and why he has permitted him to suffer these things. It's in that last section that God is taking a course of action with Satan, and he's going to talk to Job about that. That's why the Leviathan issue is sitting in there. He's going to talk to Job about the course of action that he is taking in order to deal with Satan and the things that have happened in the earth. By the way, if you look at that, here's maybe I'm going to do it in a, Let me. I'm kind of. I may be jumping ahead of myself, but here's the thing. God's going to say, I created all this and I had a reason, I had a plan, I had a purpose for doing all this. I created all this. The second thing that comes along is Satan did something that now changed that. And he'll talk about that. The third thing that comes along is I have not abandoned my original plan and purpose. I still intend to bring that to pass. And the last thing is, and here's how I'm going to do it. Do you see how those chapters lay out? That's exactly what he's saying. So he's trying to get Job to see, here's this original plan and purpose. Here's how all that changed when the adversary did what he did. I haven't abandoned that original plan. I'm still going to carry that out. And then, here's how I'm going to do it. Here's how I'm going to deal with the adversary, and here's what I'm going to do with the earth, and here's what I'm going to do with you. And here's your part in it. This is your part. So, I'm just thinking, these things are going through my head about illustrating this, but look, I just think back in the days of the Indian forts, you'd get guys on lookout, all the way around. Why? Everybody has to play their part. The old idea was don't sleep when you're on lookout. There's a terrific penalty if you're caught sleeping. Why? Because if you don't do your part, the whole fort may suffer. So think of, I hate to say it that way because that's not how God teaches it to you. But I'm just trying to illustrate and say, all of the things that God is allowing to happen to us actually do play an important role in the overall thing that He is doing to actually deal with the adversary and fulfill His original plan and purpose. And sometimes, if we don't think about it that way, we just kind of get to looking at the things that are happening and we get caught up in that and we lose sight of the bigger picture, so to speak. Okay. So, I wish we had time to talk about these things that I put up on the board here, and we really don't. I didn't want to get too far off on that. But just to kind of lay this out, in Job 38, verses 4 through 23, there are 7 issues that the Lord brings up in that first category. I didn't put it on the PowerPoint. There are 7 issues, and all 7 of those issues pertain to God's design and purpose for the earth when He first created it, and they also deal with His program for dealing with the wickedness that now inhabits the earth. That's what's sitting in that first section there. And so when God created the earth, let me ask you a question. Did He create it for wickedness to inhabit it? He did not. That was not His original plan. And so, but because wickedness does inhabit the earth, God hasn't given up on that original plan. He just has a program for dealing with that wickedness. And the high arm, I'm using something out of the scripture there, of the usurper who is now in control of the earth. Well, God brings up those 7 issues with regard to that. And to bring up those 7 issues, He uses a series of questions to bring all of those up. Now look, those things are really interesting, and it'd be great if we had time sometime to go through that. But God is not just interested in wowing us with some fantastic things about the earth and the creatures that are in it. In other words, it's not just about, the earth has a cornerstone, or it does, and that is fantastic, but that's really not what He's after here. What God is after here is talking about His operations in the earth. So let me give you, and with all the things that He created, look, let me give you an example. Job 38:12. Hast thou commanded the morning since thy days, and caused the dayspring to know his place? Now I know I'm just reading that, but I promise you if I read the 2 verses before it wouldn't help you out any more than that. So let me just walk you through this just for a moment. Hast thou commanded the morning? what is the... Clinton's giving me this. He's going like, no, okay. No, and you know what? I get that. So let me just kind of talk us through it. When he says, commanded the morning, what makes it morning? How do you know? What do you expect to happen every morning? The sun comes up. Okay. And when the sun comes up, that is the signal of morning, right? So when you're talking about, hast thou commanded the morning since thy days, you could say, he's saying to Job, have you done whatever it takes to make it morning? No, Job hasn't done that. But something has. Now you think I'm off base, but stick with me. It's the sun that commands the morning. Now look at this next phrase. And cause the dayspring to know his place. Now, dayspring. In other words, dayspring, you think of something that the start of the day springs forth. You think of that kind of thing. Again, what is it that causes the day to spring forth? What is that? The sun? Who created the sun? And God evidently put it up there for a purpose, right? And He has more than one thing He's going to do with it. If there's one thing we should have learned so far in Romans 9, is that God may have a purpose, but He will absolutely have a secondary purpose that He is going to achieve also, right? Now I know you think I'm stretching it. Hast thou commanded the morning since thy days, and caused the dayspring to know His place? The His, folks, is the S-U-N. That's the His that's talked about there. And there is power in this creation to have an effect on other parts of the creation. Because now that we've read that, and I know I kind of led you to think about it the way I wanted you to think about it, but let's read this again, and let's read the next verse with it. So, hast thou commanded the morning since thy days, and caused the dayspring to know his place, that it might take hold of the ends of the earth, that the wicked might be shaken out of it. That it is the he of the previous verse. Do you see that? In other words, there is whatever it is that commands the morning and causes the dayspring to know. That dayspring, folks, is the sun. That's who commands the morning. And it says that it might take hold of the ends of the earth. Okay, now I'm just going to say this. I looked at you and nobody went, wow. So evidently, I'm sailing out here all by myself. So let me see if I can pull back the curtain just a little bit. Is there a day when God is going to destroy the wicked? Remember what? Don't lose sight of what I just said to you. I wasn't talking for no reason. I have an original purpose for this earth. Wickedness. I didn't create it for wickedness to inhabit it, but it does. And now I'm going to use some operations in this creation in order to deal with the wicked. Remember, I just told you that. And so now he's going to say in Job, as God is giving him questions to get him thinking about it this way, yeah, have you commanded the morning since thy days? Job would be thinking, no, that wasn't me. But I know who that was. And caused the dayspring to know his place. No, that was God that created the sun that commands the morning. And He is going to, there is power in the sun to take hold on this earth and shake the wicked out of it. And that's going to happen out there at the great and terrible day of the Lord. Now, I know we're just looking at that. So, and that's part of His judgment, folks, on the earth. That's part of that judgment. So let me just give you some verses that go along with that. Am I going to be able to get them in? Yeah, if we hurry. Isaiah 24:1. Behold, the Lord maketh the earth empty, and maketh it waste, and turneth it upside down, and scattereth abroad the inhabitants thereof. What did we just read in Job 38? That the sun is going to take hold of the ends of the earth and shake the wicked out of it. Look, if I wish I had something up here that was empty, because if you had, look, here's a cup. It's got all these markers in it, and if I can turn it upside down and shake it empty, can't I? That's what God's going to do. You see, but he's getting Job to think about that. Look, let me give you this next one. I got to hurry. Isaiah 24:3. The land shall be utterly emptied and utterly spoiled, for the Lord has spoken this word. The earth mourneth and fadeth away. The world languisheth and fadeth away. The haughty people of the earth do languish. The earth also is defiled under the inhabitants thereof, because they transgressed the laws, changed the ordinance, broken the everlasting covenant. Isaiah 24:13. When thus it shall be in the midst of the land among the people, there shall be as the shaking of an olive tree. What happens if you could grab an olive tree and shake it? What would happen to the olives? Yeah, what did we just read back there in Job? To take hold on the ends of the earth and shake the wicked out of it. This is part of the judgment that's going to take place there. As the gleaning grapes when the vintage is done. Isaiah 24:18. And it shall come to pass that he who fleeth from the noise of the fear shall fall into the pit, and he that cometh out of the midst of the pit shall be taken in the snare. For the windows from on high are open, and the foundations of the earth do shake. The earth is utterly broken down. The earth is clean dissolved. The earth is moved exceedingly. Now we're reading about, and what did I just see? That's why I was using these. He is trying to get them to, he's going to get the remnant to look at this. He's going to get Job to look at this. And why is he doing this? Because you have to, just do they now. We'll do us in the next deal. They have to see there's an overall plan and purpose that God created all this to begin with. It was not created for evil, but evil does inhabit it. And so God says, I have a plan to do this, and I'm going to use the very things of creation to deal with the wickedness. I'm going to take the sun, and we don't realize, but it does. The sun has the power to rip this earth from its orbit. You say, then why doesn't it do it? Because God's not ready to do that yet. All right, not just that. Let's see, where am I here? One more. The earth shall reel to and fro like a drunkard. Reel to and fro? What? It's just staggering. And shall be removed like a cottage, and the transgression thereof shall be heavy upon. That's what I was saying. This is God judging the earth. The transgression upon it shall be heavy. And it says, and it shall fall and not rise again. And it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall punish the host of the high ones that are on high, and the kings of the earth upon the earth. All right, now, when you read Isaiah 24, and that's all we did was read in Isaiah 24, in Isaiah 30, you've got a whole nother list of these kinds of verses there. And then you can go over to the book of Revelation, where it talks about the earth being shaken and moved out of its place, and the mountains, remember what it says? And the mountains will fade away, and the islands will fall into the sea, and all that kind of business. That's the work of the sun. And when, in the midst of all of this, I have to just say it this way and then we'll stop. In the midst of all of this that is going on here, God is going to have the sun grab the earth and shake the wicked out of it. And when that takes place, a singular individual who is spoken about as having a high arm, God is going to break him at that time. And we're going to read some verses about that. But this session is up, so we'll do that when we come back in the next session. All right, so we'll take a break here.